Some say money can't buy happiness, but what if it keeps you from finding it? In the glittering towers of Seattle, where fortunes are made with a single signature, one man discovered that the most valuable thing in his life had been right beside him all along. Damian Sterling wasn't always lonely. There was a time when success felt like enough, when building an empire from nothing filled the emptiness inside. At 35, he commanded rooms with his presence, turned failing companies into gold mines, and had everything the world told him he should want. Everything, that is, except someone who saw him as more than just a bank account with a heartbeat. That's where Victoria Hayes comes in. For 3 years, she was the quiet efficiency outside his corner office. She understood numbers, schedules, and the complicated dance of corporate life. What she didn't understand was why her boss, a man who could have anyone, seemed so utterly alone. She'd bring his coffee at precisely 8 in the morning, organize his world, and pretend not to notice the sadness that flickered across his face when he thought no one was looking. She was practical where he was ambitious, grounded where he soared. She was also completely unaware that she had become the only real thing in his carefully constructed life. Her auburn hair was always pulled back in a professional bun, her gray suit spoke of competence, and she never asked for anything beyond her salary and the occasional afternoon off to help her younger sister with college. One afternoon, as the sun painted golden streaks across Damian's office, he stood at the window, watching the city below. He had built this view, this empire, this life. So why did it all feel so hollow? Behind him, a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Victoria entered, her movements graceful and efficient. "The quarterly reports are ready," she said, her voice calm and professional. "The board meeting is tomorrow at 10, and your lunch with the venture capital partners is confirmed for Thursday." She placed the leather portfolio on his desk, but as she did, something caught his attention. Maybe it was the way the afternoon light caught her profile, or maybe it was simply that he had finally allowed himself to see what had been there all along. "Victoria," he began, his voice carrying an uncertainty she had never heard before. "There's something I need to ask you. It's about the Children's Hospital Foundation Gala next Saturday." Her eyebrow lifted just slightly, the only crack in her composed exterior. "Of course. What do you need me to coordinate?" "That's just it," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that betrayed his nerves. "I don't need you to coordinate it. I need you to attend it. With me." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. Victoria's green eyes searched his face, looking for the professional reasoning, the business logic that would make this request make sense. "I'm not sure I understand," she said carefully. "You usually attend these events with someone from your social circle." "Exactly," Damian replied. And there was something raw in his voice now, something that stripped away the corporate armor he usually wore. "Everyone in my social circle sees me as an opportunity, a connection, a means to an end. I need someone who actually cares about the foundation's work, someone who understands what we're trying to accomplish without calculating the networking value of every conversation." Victoria felt her heart beat a little faster, though she couldn't quite name why. This was her boss, a man who lived in a world of private jets and penthouse suites, asking her to step into a spotlight she had spent her entire career carefully avoiding. "Mr. Sterling," she began, but he interrupted her gently. "Damian," he said. "At least for tonight. Can you call me Damian?" She took a breath, considering the weight of what he was asking. It wasn't just about attending an event. It was about crossing an invisible line they had both carefully maintained for 3 years. It was about stepping out of the shadows and into a world that would judge her, scrutinize her, and probably find her wanting. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never seen in any business meeting or corporate negotiation, that made her pause. This wasn't the billionaire CEO asking his assistant to perform a duty. This was a lonely man asking someone he trusted to stand beside him in a room full of people who only saw his money. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," he replied quickly. "Take all the time you need. I don't want you to feel pressured." As she left his office, Victoria's mind raced. She thought about her small apartment, her carefully budgeted wardrobe, her younger sister Emma, who was depending on her to help pay for college. She thought about what it would mean to walk into that world, even for just one night. That evening, long after the office had emptied, Victoria sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen. The Sterling Technologies annual report lay open beside her, filled with photos from last year's gala, women in gowns that cost more than her car, men in custom tuxedos. Everyone belonging to a world she had only ever observed from the outside. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma asking about her day. On impulse, Victoria found herself typing the truth. He asked me to attend a charity gala with him. Her phone rang almost immediately. Victoria Hayes. Emma's voice was filled with excitement. Please tell me you didn't say no to your gorgeous billionaire boss. It's not like that, Victoria protested weakly. It's professional. He needs someone who understands the company's charitable work. Right, because there's absolutely no other employee who could do that, Emma said with teenage wisdom beyond her years. When was the last time you did something exciting for yourself? The question hit harder than Victoria expected. When had she last taken a risk? When had she stepped outside her carefully controlled routine and allowed herself to want something beyond security and stability? Maybe that's exactly why you should say yes, Emma continued, her voice softening. Not because he's your boss or because it's good for your career, but because you deserve one magical night where you get to be more than just the responsible older sister who sacrifices everything for everyone else. As Victoria drove home that night, rain beginning to streak her windshield, she realized that Emma was right. For 3 years, she had watched Damien Sterling from the safety of her assistant's desk. She had organized his life while carefully compartmentalizing any feelings that might complicate their professional relationship. But tonight, he had asked her to step into his world, not as an employee, but as someone he trusted, someone whose company he genuinely wanted. The question wasn't whether she could handle the gala or fit into his social circle. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out what might happen if she stopped hiding behind her desk and finally allowed herself to be seen. What would you do in her shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content just like this. Thank you for watching. Crossing the Divide. Monday morning arrived with its usual routine, but everything felt different now. Victoria entered the office 30 minutes early as always, prepared Damien's coffee exactly how he liked it, and reviewed his schedule with her customary efficiency. But when he emerged from the elevator at precisely 8 o'clock, something in the air between them had shifted. "Good morning, Victoria," he said, and she heard the question in his voice that he was too polite to ask directly. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she replied, falling into step beside him. "Your 9 o'clock with the software development team is confirmed, and the contracts from the Tokyo office arrived overnight." She paused as they reached his office door, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. "Also, about Saturday evening, I've decided to accept your invitation." The smile that transformed his face was worth every moment of anxiety she had felt. His usual serious expression softened into something genuine and warm, revealing a side of him she had glimpsed only in rare, unguarded moments. "Thank you," he said simply. "But I want you to understand something. This isn't a corporate obligation or a professional duty. I'm asking you because I value your company, your perspective, and your presence. Not as my assistant, but as someone I deeply respect." Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks at the sincerity in his voice. "I appreciate that," she said quietly, "but I need to be honest about my concerns. I don't belong to your world, Damien. I don't know how to navigate those social circles or make small talk with senators and tech moguls. The women who attend these events, they grew up in that environment. I grew up helping my mother pay bills after my father died. That's exactly why I want you there," he replied, his steel blue eyes holding hers with intensity. "You're real, Victoria. You care about substance over status, about making a difference rather than making an impression. That's increasingly rare in the circles I'm forced to move in." She wanted to believe him, wanted to think that who she was would be enough in a ballroom full of Seattle's elite. But doubt gnawed at her confidence like an insistent whisper. What will your friends think? Damien's jaw tightened slightly. They'll think whatever they want to think. But their opinions stopped mattering to me a long time ago. The real question is, what do you think? Do you trust me enough to take this leap? That afternoon, Damien met his longtime friends, Jonathan Pierce and Richard Hawthorne, for their weekly tennis match at the exclusive Emerald City Club. Both men had inherited their wealth and spent their days managing trust funds and attending social events, living lives of practiced leisure that had always left Damien feeling vaguely empty. So who's the lucky lady for Saturday's gala? Jonathan asked as they toweled off, his tone carrying casual arrogance. Every influential person in the Pacific Northwest will be there. You need to make the right impression. I'm taking Victoria, Damien replied simply, knowing exactly what reaction his words would provoke. Richard nearly choked on his energy drink. Your assistant? Damien, this is the social event of the season. You can't be serious. Jonathan shook his head with a condescending laugh. Victoria seems like a sweet girl, truly, but she's completely out of her depth. She probably shops at department stores and has never seen a 7-course meal, let alone knows which fork to use. Damien felt anger simmer beneath his carefully maintained composure. She's intelligent, articulate, and understands our business better than most board members. Intelligence doesn't teach you how to navigate high society, Richard added with infuriating certainty. You'll spend the entire evening explaining basic social protocols instead of making important connections. Catherine Blackwood has been waiting for you to ask her. Her father owns half the commercial real estate in the city. Catherine is everything wrong with my social circle, Damien said firmly. She sees people as stepping stones and conversations as transactions. Victoria sees human beings with actual value beyond their net worth, and your assistant sees you as her boss who signs her paycheck, Richard countered. Be realistic. She operates in a completely different world. You're setting her up for embarrassment and yourself for an uncomfortable evening. As Damien drove home that evening, his friend's words echoed in his mind despite his determination to ignore them. Not because he agreed with their snobbery, but because he genuinely worried about Victoria facing their judgment. She deserved better than to be scrutinized and dismissed by people too shallow to see her worth. Meanwhile, Victoria sat in her small apartment with Emma, scrolling through photos of last year's gala on her laptop. The images showed women in designer gowns that cost more than she made in months, their jewelry catching the light like small constellations. Look at this, Emma said, pointing to a particularly elegant woman in emerald silk. She's wearing Valentino and those earrings are definitely real diamonds. How am I supposed to compete with that? You're not competing, Emma replied firmly. You're attending a charity event with a man who specifically chose you because you're not like those women. He wants substance, not sparkle. But what if I embarrass him? Victoria's voice was small, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. What if I use the wrong fork or say something inappropriate or just generally don't fit in? Emma took her sister's hands, her young face serious. Then you'll be human, which is apparently something his usual crowd has forgotten how to be. Besides, you've spent 3 years managing one of the most successful tech companies in the country. If you can negotiate with venture capitalists and handle board meetings, you can survive one dinner party. The following days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety. Victoria researched the Children's Hospital Foundation obsessively, memorizing statistics about their programs, studying the guest list, and learning everything she could about the major donors who would be there. She wanted to be prepared, to have something intelligent to contribute to every conversation. But finding something to wear proved more challenging. The boutiques she visited during lunch breaks featured gowns with price tags that made her stomach turn, representing months of careful savings. She was about to give up when she remembered her mother's vintage collection stored in the attic of their family home in Bellevue. Friday afternoon, Victoria left work early to visit her childhood home. Her mother, Eleanor Hayes, had been a fashion buyer before dedicating herself to raising 2 daughters after their father's unexpected death. The attic was filled with carefully preserved memories, and among them, They discovered a midnight blue gown that Eleanor had worn to charity events in the 90s. "Your father always said this dress made me look like royalty," Eleanor said softly, holding the gown up to catch the fading afternoon light. The classic cut and timeless elegance would be perfect with minor alterations. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes as she imagined wearing something that carried her family's love and history. "Are you sure you want me to borrow it?" she asked. "Sweetheart," Eleanor replied, her voice thick with emotion. "This dress was meant to make its wearer feel confident and beautiful. I can't think of a better occasion for it to serve that purpose again. Your father would be so proud of the woman you've become, successful not because of wealth or connections, but because of character and hard work." As Victoria drove back to her apartment that evening, the carefully wrapped gown beside her, she felt something shift in her perspective. This wasn't about trying to fit into Damien's world or impressing his wealthy friends. This was about representing herself, her values, and her family's dignity with grace and authenticity. She would walk into that ballroom not as someone pretending to be something she wasn't, but as Victoria Hayes, a woman who had earned her place through intelligence, dedication, and genuine human decency. Saturday would bring challenges and judgments she couldn't predict, but she would face them as herself. And if Damien's friends couldn't appreciate that, then perhaps they were the ones with something to learn, not her. The transformation. Saturday morning arrived with Seattle's typical gray drizzle, but Victoria woke with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her small apartment buzzed with activity as Emma arrived early with reinforcements, their mother Eleanor and a makeup artist friend from the university theater program named James Morrison. "Today we transform my responsible older sister into a goddess," Emma announced dramatically, setting down bags filled with beauty supplies and accessories. Victoria laughed nervously, clutching her coffee cup. "I just need to look presentable, not like I'm auditioning for a movie premiere." "Darling," Eleanor said with the wisdom of someone who had navigated these waters before, "when you're walking into a room full of Seattle's elite on the arm of one of the city's most eligible bachelors, presentable isn't enough. You need to look like you belong there, not through pretense, but through genuine confidence in who you are." The transformation began slowly, deliberately. James worked with an artist's eye, enhancing Victoria's natural features rather than masking them with heavy makeup. "We're not creating a character," he explained as he worked. "We're revealing the woman who's been hiding behind professional armor for too long. Your bone structure is a gift. Your eyes are already captivating. We're just making sure everyone else sees what's already there." As the hours passed, Victoria watched in the mirror as a different version of herself emerged. Not a fake version or pretend version, but perhaps the version she might have been if life hadn't taught her to be so careful, so guarded, so determined to blend into the background. Her green eyes seemed larger, more luminous. Her usually practical hairstyle had been transformed into an elegant updo that was both sophisticated and approachable. Then came the moment for the dress. Eleanor lifted the midnight blue gown from its protective covering with almost reverent care. As Victoria stepped into it, feeling the vintage fabric settle around her body like it had been waiting for this moment, something profound shifted inside her. This wasn't just a dress. It was a connection to her father, a tribute to her mother's strength, a symbol of everything her family had overcome together. The dress fit perfectly after the alterations, the deep blue fabric catching the light with every movement. Eleanor's pearl necklace, a family heirloom passed down through generations, added the finishing touch. When Victoria emerged from her bedroom fully dressed, the room fell silent. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You look like you stepped out of a classic Hollywood movie," she whispered. "Dad would be so proud." Eleanor adjusted the necklace slightly, her hands gentle. "Remember something important, sweetheart. True elegance isn't about the price tag on your dress or the designer label in your shoes. It's about carrying yourself with dignity, treating others with respect, and never apologizing for who you are or where you came from. You earned your place at that gala through 3 years of dedication and excellence. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Victoria's heart skipped as she realized Damien had arrived precisely on time, exactly as she would have expected. Emma peeked through the window blinds and whistled low. There's a black limousine outside with a driver in uniform. Your boss doesn't do anything halfway, does he? Victoria took a deep breath, gathered her small evening clutch, and walked to the door. When she opened it, Damian Sterling stood in the hallway wearing an impeccably tailored black tuxedo that made him look like he had stepped off a movie screen. But it was his expression that took her breath away. For a moment, his usual composed demeanor completely cracked, revealing something raw and genuine in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "Victoria," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of wonder she had never heard before. "You look absolutely stunning." "Thank you," she replied, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Sterling." The limousine's interior was exactly what she had expected, all leather seats and ambient lighting. But what surprised her was Damian's nervousness. As they pulled away from her modest neighborhood toward the downtown hotel, he seemed unusually anxious. "I should probably warn you about what we're walking into," he said, adjusting his cufflinks in a gesture she recognized as his tell. "The guest list includes several people who will be curious about our arrangement tonight. Some might make comments. My friend certainly will." "Curious how?" Victoria asked. "They'll wonder why someone like me would bring his assistant instead of someone from their social circle," he admitted. "Jonathan and Richard have already made their disapproval clear. They're convinced you'll be out of your depth." Victoria felt a flash of anger on his behalf, not hers. "It must be exhausting," she said quietly, "being surrounded by people who only care about appearances and social positioning." "Is that why you asked me? Because you needed someone who actually cares about the Foundation's work, rather than using it as a networking opportunity?" Damian turned to look at her directly, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "I asked you because you're the only person in my life who treats me like a human being rather than a bank account. You challenge me when I'm wrong, support me when I'm right, and never once have you asked me for anything beyond fair compensation for excellent work. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The intensity in his voice made Victoria's heart race. This was no longer just about attending a charity gala. This was about two people who had carefully maintained professional boundaries for 3 years, suddenly realizing that perhaps those boundaries had been protecting them from feelings that were becoming impossible to ignore. "We're being watched," she said as they approached the hotel entrance, seeing other elegant vehicles dropping off passengers. "Let them watch," Damian replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly the person I want to be here with." As they stepped out of the limousine into camera flashes and whispered speculation, Victoria realized that tonight would change everything. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. But there was no going back to the safe, predictable relationship they had maintained. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is allow yourself to be seen, truly seen by someone who matters. And as Damian offered his arm with genuine care rather than polite formality, Victoria understood that she was about to discover whether she was brave enough to let down her guard and see where this unexpected journey might lead. Where hearts find home. Inside the Fairmont Olympic Hotel's grand ballroom, the Children's Hospital Foundation had created something magical. Soft lighting reflected off crystal chandeliers, elegant floral arrangements filled the space with the scent of roses and orchids, and a live orchestra provided sophisticated background music. But Victoria barely noticed the opulence. She was too aware of Damian beside her, too conscious of the whispered speculation following their entrance. Jonathan Pierce appeared within minutes, his expression barely concealing his skepticism as he assessed Victoria from head to toe. "Damian, good to see you. And this must be the famous Victoria we've heard so much about." "Victoria Hayes," she replied, extending her hand with confident grace. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Pierce. Damian speaks of you often." "I'm sure he does," Jonathan replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tell me, Victoria, what brings you to our little charity gathering? Are you particularly passionate about children's health care?" The question was clearly designed to expose her as an outsider, someone who didn't belong in their carefully guarded social circle. But Victoria had prepared for exactly this type of interrogation, not with rehearsed answers, but with genuine knowledge born from actually caring. "Actually, yes," she said calmly. My sister Emma volunteers at the children's ward during her university breaks. The work the foundation does to provide medical equipment and family support services is incredibly important. Too often families face not just medical crises but financial devastation. Your foundation helps ensure that sick children receive care regardless of their parents' ability to pay. Jonathan's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly not expecting such a knowledgeable and passionate response. He mumbled something non-committal and moved away, leaving Damien with an expression of barely contained amusement. "Well handled," he murmured, as they walked toward their table. "Jonathan was trying to rattle you." "I noticed," Victoria replied with a small smile. "But I didn't spend 3 years managing your calendar without learning how to handle difficult personalities with grace." Their table included several of Seattle's most influential figures, but what struck Victoria immediately was that these weren't the shallow socialites she had feared. Senator William Ashford and his wife engaged her in substantive discussion about technology's role in improving healthcare accessibility. Tech entrepreneur Michael Chen wanted to hear her perspective on corporate social responsibility. Philanthropist Sophia Martinez, who directed the foundation, praised the innovative approach Victoria had helped develop for Sterling Technologies' charitable initiatives. As the evening progressed, Victoria found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations. These were passionate individuals working to make meaningful differences in their community, and they treated her not as Damien's assistant or an outsider who didn't belong, but as someone whose contributions and perspective had value. During the foundation's presentation, Victoria watched Damien's face as they showed a video featuring children using the educational technology his company had donated. His expression revealed deep satisfaction, the look of someone who understood that true success isn't measured in quarterly profits, but in lives touched and futures changed. She felt a surge of admiration for this man who could have simply written checks, but instead committed his company's expertise and his personal energy to making a real difference. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sophia Martinez announced from the podium, "I'd like to recognize some of our most generous supporters this year. Sterling Technologies, under the guidance of Damien Sterling and his remarkable team, has contributed not just financial resources, but innovative solutions that have transformed how we serve our young patients." The applause was genuine and sustained, and Victoria felt proud to be associated with work that mattered, with a man who used his success to lift others rather than simply accumulate more wealth and status. After dinner, as the orchestra began playing songs for dancing, Damien stood and offered Victoria his hand. "Would you honor me with a dance?" The gesture felt both natural and momentous as they moved onto the dance floor. Other couples swayed around them, but Victoria felt like they were alone in their own bubble of soft music and possibility. "You've exceeded every expectation tonight," Damien said as they moved together with surprising grace. "Watching you handle every conversation with intelligence and wit has been remarkable. But more than that, seeing you genuinely connect with people, seeing them respond to your authenticity, it's reminded me what I've been missing in my life. Thank you for including me," Victoria replied, acutely aware of his hand on her waist and the warmth of his touch. "This evening has shown me a side of your work that I only understood intellectually before. Seeing the actual impact on those children's lives makes everything feel more meaningful." "That's exactly how I hoped you'd feel," Damien said, his voice soft and sincere. "You bring that perspective to everything you do, Victoria. You make me want to be better, do better, focus on what actually matters rather than what simply generates profit or impresses shareholders." As the song continued, Victoria became aware that they had garnered attention from other guests. Some watched with curious approval, appreciating the genuine connection they could see between the billionaire CEO and his assistant. Others, particularly Jonathan Pierce and his circle, observed with obvious disapproval, their narrow definition of social acceptability unable to accommodate something real in a world built on pretense. "We're being watched," she murmured. "Let them watch," Damien replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm exactly where I want to be, with exactly the person I want to be here with. For 3 years I've been too afraid to acknowledge what you mean to me, too worried about crossing professional boundaries or making you uncomfortable. But tonight, dancing with you, Seeing you shine in a room full of people who couldn't see past their own prejudices, I realize I don't want to hide anymore." Victoria's heart raced as she processed his words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that you're not just my assistant," he replied gently. "You're my confidant, my conscience, my reminder that success means nothing if you have no one genuine to share it with. I'm saying that I've fallen in love with the woman who brings me coffee every morning, who challenges my decisions when I'm being short-sighted, who cares more about doing what's right than what's profitable. If you don't feel the same, I understand, and nothing has to change at the office. But I had to tell you." The music swelled around them, as Victoria looked into his eyes and saw not the billionaire CEO, not her powerful boss, but a lonely man who had finally found the courage to be vulnerable. "I've been afraid too," she admitted softly. "Afraid that I was reading too much into every interaction, that my feelings were inappropriate, that crossing that line would ruin everything we've built. But you're right, we can't hide anymore." As the song ended, Damien led her outside to the hotel's terrace overlooking the Seattle skyline. The rain had stopped, leaving the city sparkling with reflected lights. "This view, this city, this success," he said, gesturing to the world below. "None of it means anything without someone to share it with. I don't need someone from my social circle who knows which fork to use. I need someone who knows me, truly knows me, and chooses to be here anyway." 3 months later, Victoria stood in Damien's office, no longer at the desk outside but beside him as his partner in both business and life. They had navigated the transition carefully, with Victoria moving into a strategic role that honored her capabilities, while ensuring their personal relationship did not compromise professional ethics. Emma had been accepted to medical school with support from the foundation Victoria now helped direct. Eleanor had tearfully approved of the relationship, seeing in Damien the same kind of good man her late husband had been. The criticism from Jonathan and Richard had faded, their small-mindedness revealed as irrelevant to lives being lived with authentic purpose. Some of Damien's social circle had been surprised, others had been dismissive, but the people who mattered, the ones doing real work and making real differences, had celebrated the genuine connection they saw. Victoria learned that belonging isn't about wearing the right designer label or knowing obscure social protocols. It's about being true to yourself, treating others with dignity, and having the courage to step into spaces that weren't designed for you. She learned that sometimes the most profound love stories don't begin with grand gestures or cinematic moments, but with 3 years of daily kindnesses, mutual respect, and gradually realizing that the person you see every day has become the person you can't imagine living without. Damien learned that true wealth isn't measured in quarterly profits or stock valuations, but in finding someone who values you for who you are, rather than what you can provide. He learned that the assistant he had hired 3 years ago wasn't just exceptional at her job, but exceptional as a human being, the kind of rare soul who makes everything better simply by being present. Together, they learned that crossing boundaries, taking risks, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable can lead to something more valuable than all the success in the world. A genuine connection with another human being who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to stand beside you anyway. As Victoria looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, Damien's arm around her waist, she thought about that midnight blue dress hanging in her closet, her mother's pearls in their velvet box, and the night that changed everything. She thought about Emma's wisdom in encouraging her to take a chance, her mother's reminder that true elegance comes from character, and the courage it took to step into a ballroom full of people ready to judge her. Most of all, she thought about the man beside her, who had seen past social boundaries and corporate hierarchies to recognize something real. Success isn't about reaching the top of some imaginary ladder or impressing people who don't matter. It's about finding someone who makes the climb worthwhile, who reminds you why you're climbing in the first place, who helps you see that the view from the top means nothing if you're standing there alone. Sometimes the fairy tale isn't about a prince rescuing a princess or a Cinderella transformation at midnight. Sometimes it's about two people brave enough to admit that the professional boundaries they maintained were not protecting them, they were limiting them. Sometimes the happily ever after begins not with a glass slipper or a magical ball, but with a simple question. Would you honor me with a dance? And sometimes, if you're lucky enough and brave enough, the answer changes everything.